What's up? So Captain Marvel's out. I'm probably not going to watch it, but that's for various reasons. This time, money. Like I didn't watch Aquaman not because I disliked Aquaman. I actually really like Aquaman, at least the portrayal of Aquaman in the DC films, and I really like Jason Momoa from the first time I saw him in as Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones, which is coming back. Awesome. But anyway, coming back to Captain Marvel. So I'm not going to watch Captain Marvel. There's a lot of reasons other people aren't watching Captain Marvel, boycotts and things like that, and we'll get to that. But just my thoughts on Captain Marvel. What if part of this is to just get her out there, get her aware, and now since the merger of Fox and Sony's happened, Fox and Sony, well, anyway, Marvel Cinematic Universe now has the rights to use the X-Men. So what if this is just to get people familiar with Captain Marvel, get her introduced in there, even get some people to dislike her. That's where they're okay with Brie Larson going out there, who's the actress who plays Captain Marvel, and saying all the things she wants to say. And somebody also pointed out her being unlikable is actually closer to actually what the character is in the comic books, because she's not that likable either. So they want to dislike her, people to get attached to her in that kind of way, get aware of her. And then now with this new phase, switching from the older heroes, Captain America with Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, and all those people switching to this new phase of Marvel. They can introduce the X-Men, have Rogue come in and steal the powers from Captain Marvel, because for people who are familiar with the comic books, Rogue, who's an X-Men, she actually has the powers of flight and super strength and some level of her invulnerability due to touching Carol Danvers, because her main actual power is just absorption of people's powers and energy by touching them. So she touched Captain Marvel, and this is how Rogue's origin story actually is in the comic books, in the first run of Rogue. So these things kind of change. But anyway, talking about the change, we'll get back to that later. But you have this kind of situation where she comes in like that, has these powers, and now you introduce a whole new line of comics, of the whole new phase of Marvel Comics, with the X-Men being brought in with a bang like that. Like, look, this was one of the strongest characters in this older phase, and now they've actually been put comatose or taken out by this other character who's just a part of this major team, and then you can just kind of explode, kind of just expand into like a much wider Marvel Cinematic Universe. What if that's part of it? Let me know what you guys think about that. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about some other things in the rest of the video here, and I'm working on the premise that companies are actually in the business to actually be profitable and stay open and continue existing. So when they go for these social justice warrior type of things, or they go to like things on the political right or try to make these messages, the end goal is still to make money and be profitable. And the good thing about businesses, or just the thing about businesses, is most ideas don't work. So some of these people try things and they fail, but I'm trying to kind of think, why would the company be doing what it's doing now, and what are some options for that company to do? So one of the things is, of course, just the general pushback or reaction to some of the things that Brie Larson said during her whole run-up to this film. Some things are very suspicious, like Rotten Tomatoes taking out the want to see score after the thing plummeted. Brie Larson came out and she said in one of her pressers, she was like, when I'm doing all these press junkets, going to these places, I see there's too many, she said there was very many white males. So she's like, I want to see more diversity, I want to see more representation. She came out, she's talked about how she thinks it's a feminist movie. You see the advertising for the film even, it has that whole social justice warrior type feel to it, where it's like, yeah, girl power, like we're taking it to the boys, we're showing it to them. People are talking about the cat as one of the most exciting things. So there was a lot of reasons to kind of doubt if Captain Marvel is actually going to be decent. And so far, reviews have come out for the people who've seen it. And there's a few reviews just saying it's kind of lackluster, kind of underwhelming. But again, that actually matches the character in the comic books. I personally really enjoyed the recent films in Marvel. Of course, Avengers Infinity War. I really enjoyed Thor Ragnarok. Wasn't really that big a fan of the actual comic book of Thor Ragnarok, but really liked the actual films. Have a review of that on my channel. You can check that out. Might leave a link below. I really liked Black Panther. Also have a review for that. Not because of the whole like social importance, even though somebody was commenting about how Black Panther is a way to show that you can have something that has social importance that actually empowers or speaks to some people that are actually oppressed. And like, are Black people oppressed in that sense? Like, and if you are oppressed, how is Black Panther going to do anything about that oppression that you're feeling from a film? And people are saying like a blade doesn't count. The same person who said this thing, like Black Panther, is actually a good example of reaching out to actual oppressed people, whereas Captain Marvel has failed to do that to women. Because I don't think women are oppressed, and I also have made arguments that I don't really understand what Black people in general in the United States of America speak about when they say we are an oppressed, structurally oppressed group. That things like Black Panther, I don't really understand. I don't really see Black Panther and then personally think that me as a Negro have more opportunities in the world because Black Panther is representing something about me, and I actually am a citizen of a country in Africa. So that even goes further with that whole situation. I have a couple of videos kind of just mocking that whole thing with Black Panther. Like, are you culturally appropriating African culture as an American, as a Black American, being inspired by something that was created first by Jewish people, by two Jewish old men way back in like the 70s or something, or the 80s? And then they were basing it off of something in Africa. So are you actually appropriating African culture because you're actually American and there's a difference? Anyway, so all those things with that. So I'm wondering, with this whole situation, I do understand why some people have had pushback to it. So the fans will listen to all these things and they just said, I don't want to see anymore. And to me, boycotting is an extra thing. I support boycotts, but a key part of boycotts shows that you are not necessarily an oppressed group, because somebody else commented talking about how there's something wrong in the system if you have a situation where a company that's all powerful like Disney can make these constant mistakes with Star Wars and other companies like Sony with the female-led Ghostbusters, and then you can have something like Captain Marvel where they're just kind of mocking the fans. The comic book industry is talking about how, look, the comic books are crushing because they're hiring all these social justice warriors and things like this. But on one aspect, I'm saying, look, the fact that you're here complaining already shows that you are not necessarily that oppressed in that kind of sense. Because in my understanding of history, when somebody was systematically oppressed, held down, they had very few limitations to actually express their grievances. Yet I see everywhere, the feminist movement, the Me Too movement, all these movements, yes, they're actually pointing out actual issues that are out there, but it's not this sort of, and maybe I'm just being too literal, but it's not this sort of universal, omnipresent, omnipowerful, omniscient, like, oppression. Like, when I have that idea in mind, oppression, where you're seriously holding someone down, like, and maybe you look at an abusive relationship with a parent and child where you can't really speak up, you have no recourse, nobody's going to come to your aid. And there could be something in this why some of these movements keep going out and reaching out and talking about these microaggressions, because maybe during their childhoods, unfortunately, they were in situations where they had no recourse to actually have help. So now they get older and they keep testing. They're like, can you help me? Can you help me? Just to test and see. And I think people know in general that people want to help people. So they kind of reach out in this sense. But that's a little aside. So anyway, so these people actually have the ability to speak about these things. And on the secondary note, or 1A, 1B, 1A is like you actually can talk about these things. People are listening. People getting hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube or on other sources about people doing this. Feminist movements are getting millions and millions of dollars of money actually funded towards it. Industries like Google recently, they just did a check to see, they were sued, I think. They had facing some legal action by some female empowerment groups or some female employees saying we're being underpaid and things like that. And they actually did the actual checking of the books. And it turns out they're actually underpaying the men. And it's actually some systematic thing in there because it's a gynocentric world. We hold female interests over anyone else. And in general, if you were a society and you didn't prioritize the interests of the limiting factor of reproduction in your society, you just weren't going to go. So just genetically, it's in us to just care more about the woman. So that's in there. So the fact that people can complain about this, the fact that people have such a following in the comic books, comics gates, or just the online comics universe, mostly on YouTube, just talking about these kind of things, talking about Doctor Who, talking about all these things. And then you look at the actual success of these things. These companies are not being successful. They might just be slow in the uptake on these things, and there also just might be some general I don't want to say rot, but some general move to the left, leaning to the left of some of these companies where they've been hiring people in affirmative action hires, representation hires, and not really being that close to the actual market. And then secondary, now this is a completely secondary point to the point of these companies, are they truly being successful, is the fact that how all powerful is a company. A company like Disney is not really that all powerful. Sure, it might seem like in our lifetime it's been omnipresent, but I've studied animation, and you look at the actual history of Disney, how long it took for Disney to actually be profitable, how many chances it's actually had where it's like, okay, we're being successful, but we have these parks, we have all these other projects that we're involved in, we're selling merchandise, where just to actually keep it at a level where they're actually profitable, the company has had ups and downs, ups and downs. To be this kind of global power is a very recent thing. It's actually come in very recently. I think there was just recently when they opened Euro Disney, relatively recently when you talk about the world in general, may have been I think in the 80s or in early 90s, Disney was strapped for cash. I mean, these companies could almost shut down. This whole idea that there's mega companies is something in the environment that encourages these mega companies to just keep existing. These mega companies are not the state. Most companies in private industry fail. They come and they go. Even having a company that's 100 years old, like Disney's not even 100 years old, it's 85 years. And how many years of that has it truly been as competitive, as profitable, making these kind of moves as it is today? I think very few years of that, maybe the last 10 years, if that. So there's that aspect of how powerful and how successful are these companies. The comic book industry itself is failing. So yes, sure, they're shoving all these social justice warriors in there, but they're not doing well. They're not being very profitable. Now, part of this failure could be the fact that Marvel actually wants to shutter this out, or it just could be the company slowly moving to a different kind of format. For example, the manga and anime industry, which is in Japan and Asia, for me, I slowly switched over to manga and anime. Several reasons I did this. Part was just the money. I just couldn't afford buying comic books on a regular basis, yet I found scantillation sites and things like that of manga, and there's a regular amount, there's a lot of manga, there's a lot of anime out there. That stuff normally comes out weekly, whereas comics used to come out monthly. There's not limited stories. So I would just get that stuff online and read those things. There's dubs and things like that. There was just a lot more. So that content was coming in there. The genres are a lot more diverse. There's a lot more genres. I remember just growing up and thinking like, wait, there's actually CEOs of major companies in Japan reading manga, and then there's little kids. There's some that are targeted for like an age group of literally just like, they'll target maybe 10,000 people. So if this comic book actually sells, or this manga actually ends up selling 1,000 copies, it's actually profitable to the company because they make it rather cheap. It's normally black and white. It's on very thin paper. They're released in tankobons or these formats where there's a lot of different ones in there. So they'll have like Shonen Jump is one of the most popular ones. So they'll have that one. And then in Shonen Jump, they might be about 20 or 30 different comics. Maybe less than that. But they'll have like a few major ones and then these other ones that can kind of come in there. And now somebody might come there and buy the entire Shonen Jump because they only follow 3 of them out of the 10, let's say, in there. And then they still have the amount of money to come in there and actually get other people on there. Now you can get one-shots and things like that to test out, and then you see if you're successful. These people work in these teams where they kind of live in these homes and they have their assistants. Sometimes the assistants get out and then they run their own comics based off of that, based on the popularity and the following you've gotten from that. The creators themselves are a lot more involved in the community where they come in. And yeah, I've noticed the comic book community has expanded in different ways and things like that in the United States of America and maybe the West in general. But this is just my observations from anime and things like that. And just seeing that the comic book industry in the United States of America may just be switching more to that. Where there's one guy, there's 2 guys, Comic Book Art Secrets Pro, or something like that, with Ethan Van Scriver, and then your boy Zach at Comics Matter. Used to be Diversity in Comics. They've started doing they're creators on their own, and they're crowdfunding their projects and getting into the community. People talk to them, so I think they're creating now a newer form of how comic books are going to work. That could be some of it. Some of the thing could just be the market of the way comic books were actually done in the United States of America was not working. It was slowly switching from that, so it just wasn't profitable anymore to hire and obtain the right kind of talent, selling the right kind of storylines or the older kind of storylines that they had. So it slowly by slowly switched to social justice warrior type things. You know, you read some of these books and you're wondering like, who's actually the target audience for this? They may actually be a target audience of maybe like 10,000 people in the entire United States of America. They may actually find this interesting or less, and you're wondering like, how is that actually a thing? But that's kind of how it is with manga. Some of the things you're just like, wow, who's that for? That must be a very specific like, audience. I'm trying to think like some really off the wall kind of. There's some like, what's it called? There's some way they'll focus on some really obscure thing. Like there's a lot that actually focus on even just manga. It'll just be about manga, about a manga creator, just in daily life. Anyway, so back to my points. This could just be a situation of the market slowly switching. Another thing is this whole idea that these are all powerful companies that are just going to say whatever they want. That's not true. These markets are changing. These companies are changing. You can see slowly by slowly these companies are pivoting away. And again, I've said this several times. I think part of the benefit of these massive dinosaurs kind of dying off is they're going to die off. They're going to free up capital and money and interest into the rest of the market for other people to create other things. Us people who take in this material, we don't just have to listen to these people. We don't have to just sit there and demand Marvel create something that's going to be something that is like Iron Man. There's going to be other creators out there that can take those same storylines that were in Iron Man that we think are being replaced with the Riri Williams, the black 16-year-old super genius that might be a psychotic actual killer. Anyway, that took over Iron Man's mantle. We're saying, but the whole idea and archetype of Tony Stark can still be done by other creatives, other characters. And we have the ability to actually go out there and find other sources. Just like I went out and I found manga, I found all the sources. There's webtoons, there's all these other sources. So it might take a little more effort for you to actually go out there and find creatives who are telling stories and telling material that you like. But I think you'll be rewarded by that extra effort. I think there is an aspect of us getting used to just these big companies catering to us, and then we slowly move out to the demographics, because that's another thing. Some people just get older. Some people just get older, have different things to do with their money. You get older, you get to a point where maybe you have a mortgage, you're paying back student loans, you have kids, you're looking about your future, about your retirement. So your average comic book fan, even if all the people who are still liked those older storylines of Marvel were still there, they're going to have other reasons, other things they'd rather spend that $10 a week or $10 or $20 a month they used to spend on comics. They may have just slowly started moving to other things, because these are businesses. I don't think they're intentionally trying to lose money. There's other figures, some of the actual tail downs that you started seeing of these companies not being that profitable were not just because of the content they're creating. Some of these things are also on the other end where people are just moving to other things. Some people would rather watch Netflix instead of go to the movie theaters. So these companies are thinking, okay, we've already maxed out on our older demographics, the older people that were interested in what we were creating. So how do we get new people in here? Because those people are doing other things. They're using their disposable income for other things. We might have actually abandoned them. And then those people who still had the reason, they still had employees, they still had investors, they still had to look for other sources of income. And then just like we've heard people say, oh, there's a rape culture, or there's systematic racism, and we take their word and we think, okay, maybe they're right, because who would make these things up? So let's act on that. Then we research and we find, okay, maybe you're kind of fudging these numbers. These companies may have heard that too and thought, okay, well, we haven't tapped into this market. I mean, let's try and reach out to these groups. Let's try and create content for these other people and see if they're actually going to come. And also the globalization of these markets. But anyway, so that's my little rant idea, just thoughts on that whole situation. I'm going to add just something here at the end that's kind of tied in with the whole Jason Momoa thing and just the way we treat things in different ways. But it might not be completely related, but since Jason Momoa came up, he finally married Lisa Bonet, and the age gap, I think Jason Momoa is like 38 or something, and Lisa Bonet is about 50 something. So I think it was about a 20-year gap. It's a big gap. But somebody had posted it and they were talking about how, oh wow, this is amazing. Like, look at this age gap. And Jason Momoa told a story. He was on Jason Corbin or some kind of night show, and he was like, I told my mom when I was I think he said he was in his early teens, if not earlier than that. He said, I was watching TV and I saw Lisa Bonet and I was like, I want that one. And people were laughing. People were like, oh, it's kind of cute, all this. And then, but at the same point, does this happen in the other way? Like if it was a young, an 8-year-old woman looking at an older man and being like, I want that man, and then she pursues the man and then end up getting married to that man older. What's the perception with that? And that just made me think about, or it's not made me think about this, but I've also been seeing recently an increase, which I don't think it's an increase of it happening. I think it's an increase of the reporting of it, of incidents where teachers have statutory rape situations with their younger males. This is female teachers, mostly female teachers and younger males. And in this situation, the way it's treated is something that's always disturbed me, how with the women, it's treated in a different way. People are like, a lot of people joking, oh, I wish my teacher was like that. And that also comes from that whole idea where when Jason Momoa says, as a young male, as a prepubescent male, he saw an attractive woman and was like, I want that. And his mom wasn't like, hey, you need to stop that. That's wrong. That's off. But in that situation, it's looked, oh, that's cute. Now you finally got her and all this kind of thing. Isn't that kind of like some creepy stalking type of stalkerish thing? Anyway, but they never actually met until they were much older. And also with Lisa Bonet. She's Lisa Bonet. She's a gorgeous woman. She seems, at least from what I've seen her, what I've heard about her personally, she seems to be a rather spiritual, maybe introspective person. Seems like she'd be interesting to talk to. So there's a lot more in there than just her looking like Lisa Bonet, even at 51, which a lot of people at 20-something would really like to look like Lisa Bonet at 50 because she's just taking care of herself and everything. So anyway, so just an extra thought about that, how we look at things in different ways, depending on how it's actually done with the context, with the people. If you look at something in a different market, so these ideas that we're looking, oh, these companies are doing this intentionally to offend these people, or these companies are attacking us in a certain way. Yet you look at it on the other aspect of it. So if a younger boy looks to an older woman and has a relationship, it's looked more that the boy is more intentional in that situation. The male is more intentional in that situation, and the woman gets forgiven in some situations. You flip the gender over, and then it's looked at in an entirely different way. So in this situation, I think with the companies, what I'm trying to get at is when it's looked like these are the employees or these are the corporation that's running things and we are the lowly customers that just need to we are looked at as we are the poor little girl that's being taken advantage of, and this powerful company out there, we're going to do whatever we want with you. Whereas it's more of a relationship where it's more symbiotic, where we could also have abandoned them. Now if you look at also, they are also an employee in a way to our demands. It's not just us acquiescing to their demands, but they're also trying to provide something for us. And there's this entire employment type of situation where even if you're running a company, you kind of have some obligations to the people you hire and then the people who have invested in you. So I think every kind of relationship we have is some kind of quid pro quo, some kind of exchange thing where I am employing you, I employ by me eventually going out, and if I ended up going to pay the 500 shillings here to watch Captain Marvel, I'd be somewhat employing Brie Larson in a way where somebody is counting on me being willing enough to employ all the people involved in making the movie, funding the movie, shooting the movie, researching for it, doing the post-production, all those things. Somehow my money is going to actually fund them. So somebody bets, I bet enough people will fund this project, so I actually fund it ahead of time, and then eventually I recoup my money plus interest. So that's how I'm going to do it. So I am kind of employing those people, just how those people are employed. And so anyway, so what I'm trying to say is there's a whole lot of connections in there, different ways of looking at things. Most of the problems in the world occur because of how you define X, Y, Z. I haven't done one of these rant type videos just going off of the head in a while. I'll have some more videos come up. I have some more scripted things coming out. There's some things in this video I might touch back on in a cleaner way, but I don't know. I think I'm going to try to get back to some of these, just more thinking about a few things, let them out, stream of thought. Let me know what you think. I have already admitted that this might not be the most concise and specific video and things like that. There might be some things that are just completely off and things like that. But let me know in the comment section. Links below to the merchandise store. Like, share, and subscribe. Till next video. Goodbye. In the video, I talked about how they could introduce X-Men into this, and then that could break out into these different universes and things like that. And I have some other thoughts on just how the business aspect of how this could be ran if I had control of Marvel Cinematic Universe or Sony, or if I was just told like, hey, decide how you're going to have a creative house and do this. And I might actually end up, in my mind, I think this could work. It might actually being done already. I'm going to have that in a separate video because I end up talking about it for I think 25 minutes. So there'll be a separate video uploaded with that, with more information on that, more of my thoughts on that. If you want to check that out, there'll be links below to that once I post that video up. But if not, it's just, I think the condensing of it is finding ways to, first of all, free this whole idea of having the IP, intellectual property, but have something be more open source. Yes, you create the thing, you just find different kind of agreements with creatives of profit sharing. So you may not be making the millions, but you also not be losing millions by investing so much into more risky, questionable films. And just, anyway, more flexibility, more choice, more freedom in creativity. And I think that would bring for a better kind of result. So check out that video. Let me know what you thought about this video. Goodbye.